Okay, hello there, welcome back, or if you're new around here, my name's Clover. This is just a personal project that I figured I could share. When I was younger, I loved being read aloud to, and growing up, I always thought I just didn't get that enough, or I wish that was done more, and this is just me kind of giving that back to me and my inner child. So my goal is to, there's no set time goal, it's just a loose, I want to do it kind of thing. I want to read as many public domain works as possible, and we will be continuing where we left off in the book series, or excuse me, the book Carmilla, which to my knowledge, is a sapphic vampire novel that predates Dracula. And I was actually looking at my videos, and it's funny because I think every single time or every other video I misspell the title, and that's hilarious to me. I'm not sorry about it. I'm just gonna leave it. I think that's funny. But anyway, these are just videos that I do for myself, reading out loud. One makes my inner child just comforted, but as the person reading out loud, it's also just a really great way for me to slow down my thoughts since they're always going so fast. I do have ADHD, I'm sure that's part of it, but I'm also just really good at overthinking. And just give me a moment to relax, breathe, find my voice. These videos I fully intend to be as unedited as possible. So you may hear me mess up some words. You may hear some cat toys going on in the background. I do have a kitten right now. You might even see or hear some of my cats make an appearance. Oh, and obviously with this being as no production quality as possible, this is just being filmed from my phone. And I tried to straighten out this angle, but I think this works out because I tend to just tilt the book this way anyway. Excuse me. You might also hear my stomach make weird noises, as it does. But anyway, we'll be resuming Carmilla, written by Joseph Sheridan Lafanu, with footnotes and edits by Carmen Maria Machado. Chapter 7, Descending. It would be vain my attempting to tell you the horror with which, even now, I recall the occurrence of that night. It was no such transitory terror as a dream leaves behind it. It seemed to deepen with time and communicate itself to the very room and furniture that had witnessed the apparition. The next day, I could not bear to be alone for a moment. I would have told Papa, but for two opposite reasons. I thought he would laugh at my story, and I could not bear its being treated as a jest. I thought he might fancy that I had been attacked by the mysterious complaint which had invaded our neighborhood. I had myself no misgivings of the kind, and as he had been rather an invalid for some time, I was afraid of alarming him. I was, however, comfortable enough with my good-natured companions, Madame Perrodon and the vivacious Mademoiselle de la Fontaine. They both perceived that I was out of spirits and nervous, and at length I told them what lay so heavy at my heart. Mademoiselle laughed, but Madame Perrodon looked anxious. "By the way," said Mademoiselle, laughing, the long lime tree walk behind Carmilla's bedroom window is haunted." "Nonsense!" exclaimed Madame, who thought the theme rather inappropriate for breakfast. "Who tells that story, my dear?" "Martin says that he came up twice before sunrise, when the old yard gate was being repaired, and saw the same female figure walking down the lime tree avenue." "So he would, as long as there are cows to milk in the river fields," said Madame. "I dare say, but Martin chooses to be frightened. Never did I see a fool more frightened." "You must not say a word about it to Carmilla, because she can see down that walk from her room window," I interposed, "and she is, if possible, a greater coward than I." Carmilla came down rather later than usual that day. "I was so frightened last night," she said, "so soon as we're together." And I am sure I should have seen something dreadful if it had not... And I am sure I should have seen something dreadful if it had not been for that charm I brought from the poor little hunchback whom I called such hard names. I had a dream of something black coming around my bed, and I awoke in a perfect horror. I really thought, for some seconds, that I saw a dark figure near the chimney-piece, but I felt under my pillow for my charm. The moment my fingers touched it, the figure disappeared. I felt quite certain that, had it not been by me, something frightful would have made its appearance and perhaps throttled me, as it did those poor people we heard of. Well, listen to me, I began, and recounted my adventure, at the recital of which she appeared horrified. And was the charm near you? She asked, earnestly. No, I had dropped it into a china vase in the drawing-room, but I shall certainly take it with me tonight, as you have so much faith in it. At this distance of time I cannot tell you, or even understand, how I overcame my horror so capably as to lie alone in my room that night. I remember distinctly that I pinned the charm to my pillow. I fell asleep almost immediately and slept even more soundly than usual at all night. I'm making mess-ups here and there. The next night I passed in the same way. My sleep was delightfully deep and dreamless, but I wakened with a pleasant, almost luxurious sense of lassitude and melancholy. Well, I told you so, said Carmilla, when I described my quiet sleep. I had such delightful sleep myself last night. I pinned the charm to the breast of my nightdress. It was too far away the night before. I am quite sure it was all fancy, except the dreams. I used to think that evil spirits made dreams, but our doctor told me it is no such thing. It is only that a fever or some other malady passing by knocks on the door, as they often do, he said, and, not being able to get in, passes on. And what do you think the charm is? I said. It has been fumigated or immersed in some drug and is an antidote against the malaria, she answered. Then it acts only on the body? Certainly. You don't suppose that evil spirits are frightened by bits of ribbon or the perfumes of a druggist's shop. No, these complaints, wandering in the air, begin by trying the nerves and so infect the brain. But before they can seize upon you, the antidote repels them. That, I am sure, is what the charm has done for us. It is nothing magical. It is simply natural. I should have been happier if I could have quite agreed with Carmilla. I did my best, but the impression was losing its force. For some nights I slept profoundly, but still every morning I felt the same lassitude, and a languor weighed upon me all day. I felt myself a changed girl. A strange melancholy was stealing over me, a melancholy I would not have interrupted. Dim thoughts of death began to open, and an idea that I was slowly declining took gentle, and somehow not unwelcome, possession of me. If it was sad, the state of mind it induced was also sweet. Whatever it was, my soul acquiesced to it. I would not admit that I was ill, and I would not consent to tell my papa or to have the doctor sent for. My nose is really itchy. I feel like talking about it makes it worse. Carmilla became more devoted to me than ever, and her strange paroxysms of languid adoration more frequent. She doted on me with increasing ardor the more my strength and spirits waned. It shocked me like a momentary glare of insanity. Without knowing it, I was now in an advanced stage of the strangest illness under which any mortal had ever suffered. There was an unaccountable pleasure in its earlier symptoms that concealed from me the incapacitating effects of the malady. This fascination increased for a time, until it reached the point when a sense of the horrible mingled with it, deepening, as you shall hear, until it discolored and perverted the whole state of my life. If you hear like a snoring or like a wheezy breathing in the background, I think it is my cat Lo-Fi. it's so funny because she tends to just like flop and then immediately sleep. It's like, I think she can enter REM in a matter of minutes, seconds even. But yeah, she's not far from where I'm reading, so you might hear her. The first change I experienced was rather agreeable. It was very near the turning point from which began the descent of Avernus. There's a footnote there, footnote 13. Avernus is a volcanic crater near Naples, Italy, historically believed to be the entrance to the underworld. The word means without birds. Didn't know that. Certain vague and strange sensations visited me in my sleep. The prevailing one was of that pleasant, peculiar cold thrill we feel while bathing when we move against the current of a river. This was soon accompanied by dreams that seemed interminable and were so vague that I could never recollect their scenery or persons. But they left an awful impression and a sense of exhaustion, as if I had passed through a long period of great mental exertion and danger. After all these dreams, there remained on waking a remembrance of having been in place. After all these dreams, there remained on waking a... Hold on. I think I'm distracted. After all these dreams, there remained on waking a remembrance of having been in a place very nearly dark, and of having spoken to people whom I could not see, and, especially, of one clear voice, a woman's, very deep, that spoke as if at a distance, producing always the same sensation of indescribable solemnity and fear. Sometimes there came a sensation as if a hand was drawn softly along my cheek and neck. Sometimes it was as if warm lips kissed me, longer and longer and more lovingly as they reached my throat, and there the caress fixed itself. My heart beat faster, my breathing rose and fell rapidly. Then came a sobbing that rose into a sense of strangulation and turned into a dreadful convulsion in which my senses left me and I became unconscious. There's a footnote there as well. Footnote 14. If this isn't an orgasm, nothing is. Oh my god, that's hilarious. Carmen Maria Machado is hilarious. It was now 3 weeks since the commencement of this unaccountable state. My sufferings had, during the last week, told upon my appearance. I had grown pale. My eyes were My eyes were dilated and darkened underneath, and the languor, is it languor or languor? And the languor which I had long felt began to display itself in my countenance. My father asked me often whether I was ill, but with an obstinacy which now seems to me unaccountable, I persisted in assuring him that I was quite well. In a sense, this was true. I had no pain. I could complain of no bodily derangement. My complaint seemed to be one of the imagination or the nerves, and, horrible as my sufferings were, I kept them with a morbid reserve very nearly to myself. It could not be that terrible complaint which the peasants called the oupire, for I had now been suffering for 3 weeks, and they were seldom ill for much more than 3 days before death put an end to their miseries. Nightly orgasms for 3 weeks is not so bad. Carmilla complained, too, of dreams and feverish sensations, but by no means of so alarming a kind as mine. Mine were extremely alarming. Had I been capable of comprehending my condition, I would have invoked aid and advice on my knees. The narcotic of an unsuspected influence was acting upon me, and my perceptions were benumbed. A very Edward Scissorhands looking lady, or very Tim Burton inspired. I don't remember her being described as like dripping with blood and stuff. I am going to tell you now of a dream that led immediately to an odd discovery. One night, instead of the voice I was accustomed to hear in the dark, I heard one, sweet and tender, and at the same time terrible, which said, "Your mother warns you to beware of the assassin." At the same time, a light unexpectedly sprang up, and I saw Carmilla standing near the foot of my bed in her white nightdress, bathed from her chin to her feet in one great stain of blood. Oh, that's where it came from. My nose. Okay. Maybe I should put some lotion on it. I woke with a shriek, certain that Carmilla was being murdered. I remembered springing from my bed. My next recollection is standing in the hallway, crying for help. Madame and Mademoiselle came scurrying out of their rooms in alarm. A lamp burned always in that hallway, and, seeing me, they soon learned the cause of my terror. I insisted that we knock on Carmilla's door. Our knocking was unanswered. It soon became a pounding and then an uproar. We shrieked her name, but all was vain. We all grew frightened, for the door was locked, and hurried in a panic back to my room. There, we rang the bell long and furiously. If my father's room had been at that side of the house, we would have called him up at once to our aid. But alas, he was quite hard of hearing, and to reach him involved an excursion for which none of us had courage. Servants, however, soon came running up the stairs. I donned my dressing gown and slippers in the meantime, and my companions were similarly attired. Recognizing the voices of the steward and his men in the hallway, we exited together, and after repeating our fruitless summons at Carmilla's door, I ordered them to force the lock. They did so. We stood, holding our lights aloft in the doorway, and so stared into the room. We called her by name, but there was still no reply. We looked around. Everything was undisturbed. It was exactly in the state in which I had left it our bidding on our good night. But Carmilla was gone. How long is this next chapter? Really? Okay, yeah, we can do this. Okay. Chapter 8. Search. At sight of the room, perfectly undisturbed except for our violent entrance, we began to cool a little and soon recovered our senses sufficiently to dismiss the men. It occurred to Mademoiselle that possibly Carmilla had been wakened by the uproar at her door, and in a panic had jumped from her bed and hid herself in a cupboard or behind a curtain, from which she could not, of course, emerge until the steward and his men had withdrawn. We recommenced our search and began to call her name again. You may hear more cat toys in the background. I have many cat toys to keep little Forrest busy. It was all to no purpose. Our perplexity and agitation increased. We examined the windows, but they were secured. I implored of Carmilla, if she had concealed herself, to play this cruel trick no longer, to come out and to end our anxieties. But it was useless. I was by this time convinced that she was not in the room, nor in the dressing room, the door of which was still locked on this side. She could not have passed it. I was utterly puzzled. Had Carmilla discovered one of those secret passages which the old housekeeper said were known to exist in the manor house? Nose is itchy. There's a footnote there as well. Footnote 15. Half a century before, a serving girl followed the sound of a baby crying into one of those passages, the entrance of which was hidden behind a particularly gruesome tapestry of Leda and the Swan. It is said that when her eyes adjusted to the darkness, she saw a figure crouched against the stone wall, holding a swaddled mass. When the figure looked up, the serving girl reported its face was her own. Not an uncanny likeness as of a sister, but stolen from me, was the quote. As for the bundle in its arms, when the figure stood to its full height, the blanket fell open, and nothing was there. The serving girl was found by her screams. The family was kind enough to pay for the many doctors and priests who would eventually attend her bedside. Interesting. Come on, I can finish this chapter, and then I can scratch my nose to all my whatever. The tradition of their exact situation had been lost. A little time would, no doubt, explain all, utterly perplexed as, for the present, we were. It was past 4 o'clock. and I preferred passing the remaining hours of darkness in Madame's room. Daylight brought no solution of the difficulty. The whole household, with my father at its head, was in a state of agitation the next morning. Every part of the chateau was searched. The grounds were explored. No trace of the missing lady could be discovered. The men prepared to drag the streams. My father was in distraction. What a tale to have to tell the poor girl's mother on her return. Should I? No, this won't be for long. I, too, was almost beside myself, though my grief was quite of a different kind. The morning passed in alarm and excitement. It was now 1 o'clock, and still no tidings. I will lightly leave the door ajar so that it doesn't quite disturb this reading experience. Okay, that should help. This is, after all, supposed to be ASMR-ish. Returning to Carmilla's room, I found her standing at her dressing table. I was astounded. I could not believe my eyes. She beckoned me to her with her pretty finger in silence. Her face expressed extreme fear. Carmilla, what you doing? I ran to her in an ecstasy of joy. I kissed and embraced her again and again. I ran to the bell and rang it vehemently to bring others to the spot that they might relieve my father's anxiety. Dear Carmilla, what has become of you all this time? We have been in agonies of anxiety about you, I exclaimed. Where have you been? How did you come back? Last night has been a night of wonders, she said. For mercy's sake, explain all you can. It was past 2 last night, she said, when I went to sleep as usual in my bed, with my doors locked, both that of the dressing room and that opening upon the hallway. My sleep was uninterrupted and, so far as I know, dreamless. But I woke just now on the sofa in the dressing room there, and I found the door between the rooms open and the other door forced. How could all this have happened without my being wakened? It must have been accompanied with a great deal of noise, and I am particularly easily wakened. And how could I have been carried out of my bed without my sleep having been interrupted, I, who am startled by the slightest stir? By the time Mademoiselle, my father, and a number of the servants were in the room. Oh, by this time. Good thing these chapters are short. Carmilla was, of course, overwhelmed with inquiries, congratulations, and welcomes. She had but the only story to tell, and seemed the least able of all the party to suggest any way of accounting for what had happened. My father took a turn up and down the room, thinking. I saw Carmilla's eye follow him for a moment with a sly, dark glance. When my father had sent the servants away, Mademoiselle having gone in search of a tincture of valerian and smelling salts, and there being no one now in the room with Carmilla except my father, Madame, and myself, he came to her, taking her hand very kindly. He held her to the sofa and sat down beside her. Will you forgive me, my dear, if I risk a conjecture and ask a question? Who can have a better right? She said. Ask what you please, and I will tell you everything, but my story is simply one of bewilderment and darkness. I know absolutely nothing. Put any question you please, but you know, of course, the limitations Mamma has placed me under. Perfectly, my dear child. I need not approach the topics on which she desires our silence. Now, the marvel of last night consists in your having been removed from your bed and your room without being wakened, and this removal having occurred apparently whilst the windows were still secured and the 2 doors locked upon the inside. I will tell you my theory, but first I must ask you a question. Carmilla was leaning on her hand dejectedly. Madame and I were listening breathlessly. Now, my question is this. Have you ever been suspected of walking in your sleep? Not since I was very young. But you did walk in your sleep when you were young. Yes, I know I did. I have been told so often by my old nurse. My father smiled and nodded. Well, what has happened is this. You got up in your sleep and unlocked the door, not leaving the key as usual in the lock, but taking it out and locking it on the outside. You again took the key out and carried it away with you to some of the 25 rooms on this floor, or perhaps upstairs or downstairs. There are so many rooms and closets, so much heavy furniture, and such accumulations of lumber that it would require a week to search this old house thoroughly. Do you see now what I mean?" "I do, but not at all," she answered. "And how, Papa, do you account for her finding herself on this sofa in the dressing room, which we had searched so carefully?" I said. "She came there after you had searched it, still in her sleep, and at last awoke spontaneously, and was as much surprised to find herself where she was as anyone else. I wish all mysteries were as easily and innocently explained as yours, Carmilla," he said, laughing. "And so we may congratulate ourselves on the certainty that the most natural explanation of the occurrence is one that involves no drugging, no tampering with locks, no burglars or poisoners or witches, nothing that need alarm Carmilla or anyone else for our safety." Carmilla looked radiant and charming. Nothing could be more beautiful than her coloring. Her beauty was, I think, enhanced by that graceful languor that was peculiar to her. I think my father was silently contrasting her looks with mine, for he said, "I wish my poor Laura was looking more like herself," and he sighed. So our alarms were happily ended, and Carmilla restored to her friends. Well, that's it for now, because my nose is too itchy to continue. But thanks for tagging along. ASMR-ish. Hopefully my nose is better later, and hopefully I have the wit to not read while there's so much noise in the background. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye.